Underneath, we want to drain the coolant out. There's no drain on the radiator, so underneath where the lower radiator hose is, you want to put a drain bucket, and we'll use some hose clamp pliers, loosen up the hose clamp. You want to make sure this is also cold. The engine's cold when you do this. You don't want to do this with hot coolant. Loosen that up. And then just grab the hose, try to rock it back and forth a little bit. And be careful not to splash yourself. If you squeeze this hose clamp far, it will lock in place. So just use some different hose clamp pliers, and you can slide that off. It's a little bit easier. And just let the coolant drain out nice and slow. We need to separate the transmission lines from the radiator. Just pop these little caps off. You can use a trim tool or a screwdriver. There's clips in here. You need to take the clips out. There is special tools you can use, or you can use a pick. Just slide beside the clip. Just try to pop it out. This is what the clip looks like. And take this clip out as well. Just grab the lines and just shake them. Try to pry these out a little bit. There we go. Pop it off. You might need a drain bucket if some fluid comes out. Do the same on this one. Oh, there we go. Get that off. Take this radiator hose off. We're going to use the hose clamps. Move these hose clamps. If you squeeze them all the way, they kind of lock. Just be careful of your fingers. Oh, sometimes you just have to hold them. Move it down. Slide that off. Want to loosen up the fan clutch. You want to use some type of fan clutch tool. This one is a 36 millimeter. Set that up. This one attaches to the air hammer. And just loosen it up a little bit. There we go. You just got to crack it free. And you can loosen up the rest by hand. Although we're not going to be able to move it because the cage is going to be in the way, the fan shroud. Disconnect this connector right here. Push down on the tab. Slide it back. If there's a little lock tab on there, you got to push that back. Use a 10 millimeter socket. Take these two bolts out up on top. Slide that bolt out. Do the same on the other one. You want to pop these lines out of this bracket right here. You can use a pry bar or a screwdriver. Just pry those back out of the way a little bit. There's a push pin right here. Just pop that off. There is a push pin on the bottom as well. That one you could just slide off like that. Just get underneath there with a screwdriver or a pry bar. Slide that out. And then you just want to slide this up a little bit just to get it loose. Now we'll loosen up the fan. It's probably going to rub on the shroud. Pop off. Slide it out of the way a little bit. And grab the fan shroud. Slide up. And you kind of got to work together with the fan shroud and the fan. We have to get over this area of the radiator. Just be careful. Just push that forward. And kind of work it together. Watch the water pump if the fan gets stuck on the bolts. And it slides right out. Take this bar off, use a 10mm socket, take this bolt out, and then the one on the other side of the battery. These two bolts, use a 10mm socket. There's two bolts here, and there's two right here and two right here. Use a 13mm socket, take all those bolts out. Grab this cross member and just slide it out. Take this retainer off right here. Slide that wire harness out of the way. Take a trim tool, slide the clips out. You can take a pair of pliers and from the back side, just squeeze the clips. Pop those off. Underneath, you're just going to have to grab and try to pull. And slide that off. On the back side of here, there is a 13mm bolt. You're going to have to use a 13mm socket. And it's not something you can see. It's just behind here, so go down here and you'll be able to feel it. It's connected to this piece right here. So take that out. Just be careful, you don't want to ruin the condenser. Once you get it loose, you should be able to do it by hand. Take that bolt out. You can grab this piece and just slide it out of the way. There's a hose right here. Should be able to just take that off, slide that out of the way. And there's two bolts on both sides of the radiator. Take those out. Use a 10mm socket. Grab the condenser, just slide it up. There is some brackets at the bottom of the radiator. Slide that out, and you can grab the radiator, slide it out. On the old radiator, we have to take these bushings off, slide those off. And these are going to go down below here. And slide the radiator in position. And before we put that radiator into those feet, we're just going to pull up the condenser. There's a couple slots in the front that the condenser has to go in. Try to get the radiator into those slots, or the condenser into the radiator slots. Right there, and right there. Get that lined up and push it down. Now put the screws in, get those started. Tighten those down. We're gonna lift the radiator and condenser together, try to get it to line up with those grommets down below. And that's sitting the way it should, right there. And reposition the radiator support and the bracket. And sneak that bolt in. It's kind of hard to see. Get that started. Before we tighten this down though, we are going to put that bracket across. Now slide this bracket in place. Get the bolts all started. And you can kind of see where the bolts were when you took it apart. You want to put that in the same spot, as close as possible. These two bolts right here. And tighten those down. While you have this all open, just double check the hood alignment. Make sure it looks like it lines up good. And that looks good right there. If you need to adjust it, if it's way off, you might want to adjust the bar a little bit. But if it's just minor adjustments, you can come over to these 3 bolts, use a 10mm socket, loosen those up, and adjust the latch accordingly. And line the grille up. Push back in place. And put these screws in. Tighten them down. Slide the fan and the shroud right down. And you just got to get it past where the filler neck is. I mean, where the radiator hose is going to go. And there's a couple buttons down below that need to line up on the radiator. Just try to get those to line up where it sits. You can tell they're lined up if you grab the bottom of the fan shroud and try to pull it out and it stays in position. That's good. And then right here, that just has to clip in. It's still good. Get the fan started. Now tighten down the fan clutch onto the water pump. And if you have a wrench that fits, you can use that, or just a big adjustable. And just give it a good few taps with a hammer. If you have the ability to hold the water pump from spinning, if you have a special tool that'll hold that, then do that. But otherwise, just get this lined up. Give it a couple taps. That'll be tight. And plug the connector in. Lock it down. And put these 2 bolts in. Tighten both of those down. And put this hose on. Slide that on. If there's a clamp on there, put that clamp on. Now put the hose on. And tighten down the clamps. Put this bar in place. And put the 2 bolts in. Tighten those down. The other one that goes right here. Now we can put the transmission fluid cooler lines, get those secured in the radiator. Just press those in, push this little cap over. Same on this one. Make sure they're locked in there correctly. There is a bracket up here. Just make sure the lines are in that bracket, just like that. Take the clamp, put the clamp over the hose, get the hose on the radiator. and tighten down the clamp. Just snug and just make sure it's not loose. That looks good. Now add your appropriate coolant and level. You want to make sure you put the radiator cap back on, snug it up. Make sure you add fluid over where the reservoir is to the appropriate level. You want to make sure you run the vehicle for about 10 minutes, constantly checking to make sure it's not overheating and looking at the level. You never want to open the radiator cap when it's hot. After it's run about 10 minutes and the engine's warmed, you can shut the vehicle down, let it cool down, and adjust the levels accordingly. You want to check the transmission fluid and adjust the level accordingly. You want the vehicle running and with it in park while it's warmed up. Pull the dipstick tube out. Check the level, make sure it's in between those two spots, those hash marks, and adjust accordingly. To fill the transmission fluid, use a skinny funnel that'll actually fit where the dipstick goes and add the appropriate fluid.